Today we'll hear from a variety of great speakers, all listed on this slide, and they will all be talking to you about data for monitoring tree cover. And I'm your moderator of this webinar. My name is Gabrielle Nussbaum, and I work at the World Resources Institute on nature-based solutions and sustainable landscapes, and particularly the application of Global Forest Watch data for monitoring. We have three main goals today for this webinar. Firstly, we'll be introducing you to some of the latest data that we have on Global Forest Watch to monitor tree cover. We'll also be learning about the challenges and where we're going when it comes to monitoring restoration progress. And we'll hear from some of those who are already applying this data in their work. And lastly, as we mentioned, there'll be time for the speakers to answer some of your questions. Next slide. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with an overview of Global Forest Watch. Some of you may already be using Global Forest Watch, but maybe for some of you, this will be your first time learning about the platform. So we're happy to introduce you to it. And I'm going to start with that. Next slide. Global Forest Watch offers an integrated, openly accessible suite of tools designed to enable experts and non-experts to access information about forest change and mobilize action. Our monitoring systems use remotely sensed data, which is analyzed to detect changes in forests. We've designed the Global Forest Watch website to be simple to use, completely free, and it's also open source. And Global Forest Watch and its data are made possible through a wide range of partners, which includes both users of the data, but also data providers and developers. Next slide. Which brings me to our topic today. We're going to dive deep into these data sets here. The first, tropical tree cover, which was developed by our colleagues here at WRI and was just published this past summer. And next we'll be discussing tree cover gain, as well as net change in tree cover, which were developed by our great partners over at the University of Maryland. The development of these data we're discussing today is made possible through the Climate Solutions Partnership, a collaboration between HSBC, WRI, and WWF, along with a network of local partners. And it was also made possible by the Bezos Earth Fund through the Land and Carbon Lab. Next slide. So before we go on, I'd love to learn more about who is here today and what your interests are. So you should see a poll pop up to give us an idea of who you all are. So I'll give you a few seconds or so to complete the poll. I'm also going to read aloud the questions, especially for the translation. The first is, are you new to Global Forest Watch? So yes or no. Are you familiar with the tree cover data sets on Global Forest Watch? Yes and no. And the third is, what sector do you work in? Research, government, NGO, private sector, and project developer. I'll give you a few seconds to complete it. I see many answers still trickling in. Okay, looks like we're slowing down. So I see it's about 50-50. 52% is new, 53% is new to Global Forest Watch. That's great to see. So I'm glad that we're able to show that, and 47% have used it. Most people are not familiar with the tree cover data sets on Global Forest Watch, 62%. And then it looks like the vast majority are from NGO, the NGO world, with the second being research and private sector. So that's great. Good to see who's here in the room and what you already may or may not know. Okay, I will end the poll. Oh, the poll's ended. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and give you an overview of Global Forest Watch. Just hold on one second. Bear with me while I find the share screen button. There it is. Okay. Okay, hopefully you're seeing, is this the right screen? You're seeing the right screen. Okay, it looks like it. Okay. So this is globalforestwatch.org. So you can go to www.globalforestwatch.org and follow along if you'd like, or just save it for another time. But this is the landing page where you'll get to. There's a menu of options across the top. The first one is the map, where you can visualize the data. There's also a dashboard section where you can get summary statistics of any country or region with many of our available data. You can also visit our help center, where we have tutorials and also access to our community forum and other information. And I also just wanted to point out under other tools that Global Forest Watch offers a suite of tools. We have Global Forest Watch Pro, which is for corporate supply chain monitoring, Forest Watcher, our mobile application for alert monitoring, and the Global Forest Review, which is a living report on the status of the world's forests, which track indicators for monitoring forest trends. And I think you'll learn today a little bit about how some of these tree cover data sets will also contribute to the Global Forest Review for some of the indicators that we're tracking. But today we're going to focus on the map. So I'm just going to click the map to get access to it. And here is where you can visualize all the data that we have available on Global Forest Watch. The left side here shows all the categories of data we have. And by clicking on a category, you'll see the different data available. So I'll be showing you tree cover data and the gain and net change data. So first we'll click on land cover, and you'll see pop up the available data now. Currently, this tree cover data set from 2000 and 2010 is on, and that's indicated by the green color of the toggle. To turn data on and off, you just click the toggle, but there's also a legend which shows you which data is available or currently on, which data is currently on. And if you'd like to turn any data off, you can just click remove layer directly from the legend as well. So we're going to show you tropical tree cover. It's the second on this list. I'm going to toggle it on, and you can start to see the data populate. And also it appears on the legend. The data is filterable. So you can filter it by the tree cover percentage threshold here, depending on what you'd like that to be. And you can also change if you'd like to see it by hectare or meter, depending on what you're interested in. You can get the metadata information by clicking on this little eye. This will give you information about the resolution, the geographic coverage, source, date of content, any limitations, citations, license information. So all the information you'd need about the data. And there's also a download data link if you would like to access the data directly. So in this case, this link will lead you to Global Forest Watch's open data portal. Sometimes it will lead you to different areas depending on where the data lives to access it. This particular data for tropical tree cover can be downloaded in 10 by 10 degree tiles when you click on this link. You can also perform on-the-fly analyses to understand tree cover in an area of interest. So you would probably want to zoom into an area. I'm just randomly zooming right now, and you can see it populating. There it goes. There's an analysis tab where I'm going to click on. You can either select a political boundary, terrestrial ecosystem, or river basin, or you can click here to draw a shape on the map or upload your own polygon data. So I'm going to draw, so click draw and add some points. And once my points are done, double click to close it. And you can see the analysis starting. Sometimes it takes a little while, and it'll give you information about that area. To access the information about forest gain and net change, I'm going to hit forest change. We have here tree cover gain. I can turn that on to see these blue pixels. It's on its, you can see it across the map. This is where there's been gain between 2000 and 2020, and we'll learn more about what that means. But you can also look at net change under tree cover change here as well. So you can change net change by percentage to look at the country, the province, state, or district municipality. And another thing that might be interesting is this opacity button. Right now we have these two layers on, but you can't really see one over the other. So you can change the opacity of the data layer so you can see through it a bit to help overlay some of these data sets. Okay. And now I will stop sharing. That's the end of this demo. We'll talk a lot more about these data throughout the webinar. I think we'll go to the slides. Great, thank you. Okay. So next, I would like to introduce Fred Stoll, who's the Deputy Director for Land and Carbon Lab, and he'll talk more about some of the ways we monitor for restoration, including the challenges and successes for monitoring at different scales. So Fred, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you all for joining. It's such a pleasure to do this introduction here. We do a little bit of step back from what Gabrielle just told you. So restoration monitoring, I think lots of people know Global Forest Watch on the deforestation, tree cover change monitoring. And, you know, I have worked also a long time on that. And next slide, please. It is a high time now to think more about restoration monitoring. We've all seen the last 5, 6, 7 years so much pledges onto restoration, the trillion trees, the Africa 100, 20 by 20. There's enormous interest to actually think about our ecosystems and put more trees in the ground for all the right reasons. But on the other hand, the investment in monitoring has been a little bit lacking. And next click, please. And that is actually, we thought maybe, and I was thinking that too, it must be easy because we have clearly know how to do deforestation monitoring. The opposite is restoration monitoring. But actually, I think we all find out that restoration monitoring is kind of a bit of harder than we thought. Next click, please. And there are several reasons for it. But of course, one thing is deforestation monitoring is a discrete event. There's a tree and it's gone, and satellites are so good in picking it up. Tree growth is slow, it's dispersed, and it's much more difficult to pick up. You have a seed, becomes a seedling, becomes a sapling, it grows slowly, and then it suddenly is picked up, but that might take a few years. What do you do about it? Next click, please. Restores means something different for different people. Is a primary forest is then restored, or is it a few trees back is restored? What does it mean? And next slide. The deforestation, of course, has a lot of discussion is about it. We have very good definitions. We have very protocols. Restoration, we're still a little bit at the beginning of thinking about what kind of protocols we can do on this. Next slide, please. And another issue I like to put some effort on, of course, scale in our monitoring world is always important. But on the restoration, and please the next 2 clicks, it's always important to think about it, because a project for restoration, you put trees on the ground, that always happens somewhere local in a half a hectare. And that means like you need very different tools to look at that half a hectare. Then if you want to see how's the global world doing with restoring their trees. And of course, there's the landscape in between. They all need to speak to each other. But in this restoration part, it's really an issue. And I'd like to go a little bit deeper on this in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So project scale. The project scale monitoring, you need, of course, very well-defined boundary. If it's half a hectare and you are a few, 100 meters to the left or right, that might not be the trees you thought about. There's a very different interventions, and how can remote sensing always see those interventions? How do you plant species? It requires much more finer resolution. And next click, please. And the next click. And that means also you see it on the data sets. The data set is a much more a combined data set. There's field data you need to think about. You need to think about drones, you need to think about visual interpretation, and you probably need them all of them. And there's also tropical tree cover. And you heard Gabrielle talking about it, and later in this discussion, one of the developers will talk more about that data set too. But so project scale monitoring is really an amalgamation of different ideas coming together and doing this on the project scale. Next slide. The landscape scale is a little different again. Next slide. The landscape scale, of course, you have, and the next few clicks. The landscape scale, you have, of course, multiple objectives in the land. There are people living there, there's forest, there's agriculture. And here you see Aurora, which is an example of how to use those different sustainability and water quality and biodiversity scales into one kind of scale. But it means you have to have very different techniques. Probably field work and field sampling is not so much part of it. Here you really work on remote sensing. You think about what are the broader scales in this monitoring level. Again, what kind of data set could you use? That is, again, of course, the tree cover, very good set for this. And also the 30-meter gain and loss from the University of Maryland, you know, the long-term data sets that they have developed and we feature on Global Forest Watch, which also has the gain. And we hear also later more about the data set in this webinar. Next slide, please. And of course, the global slide scale. Next slide. Global, we want to restore, you know, our world. We want to at least get 1 gigaton from natural-based solutions. So we want to know where is the world going with the restoration. Next clicks. And that also means need to have targets can be set, but it also requires consistent data, because if we want to know where the world is going, we need to know where the gain is, we need to go where the loss is, and we need to figure out if indeed the world go in the right direction. Again, it requires a different set of thinking on your monitoring skills and thinking what kind of data will you use. And next click. And again, what data sets we can use, again, the 30-meter and the tropical tree cover would be great data sets to think about and get some handle on this. Then we go into my last slide. Just a quick summary. So restoration monitoring had different challenges than deforestation monitoring, something at least I, as a monitoring professional, didn't get at first, but it's quite different than we thought. Restoration monitoring is still developing. There are great tools. Our colleagues at the Restoration and the Africa 100 have very good new tools, but it's more an amalgamation of different tools coming together. Scale, always important, but even more so on restoration. A project developer probably cannot do nothing with the 30-meter data because it needs like a meter data and vice versa. And of course, we have the issue that projects can be very successful while a country can still lose forests. And that's still, you have to find that as a monitoring professional, how do you combine those data? With that, I think I want to give it over to Gabrielle. Thank you, and I'll hear from you later.
Sorry, was muted. Of course, had to have that happen once. Thanks, Fred. As we heard, restoration monitoring can be challenging, but new technology is developing that hopefully will get us a little bit closer. So next, I'd like to introduce Jessica Ertel, who is a data analyst at WRI, and she will be introducing tropical tree cover data published this year. So Jessica, on to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Ertel. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited to talk to you about two of my favorite things, data and trees. I work as a data scientist on WRI's restoration monitoring team, and I'm going to be presenting today the tropical tree cover data and methods on behalf of my team. Next slide. Nowadays, it's really easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of geospatial data that are becoming available at different resolutions, different scales, and using different machine learning techniques. So I wanted to start by taking us back to the beginning and explaining how we got from the 3 pictures that you see here on the top to the map that you see on the bottom. So one of the driving forces behind the design of the TTC method was a need to better represent the presence of trees in areas where the predominant land cover type is not forest. We have really high accuracy data sets for monitoring forests, but they fall short of really detecting the systems that are represented in these pictures. So agroforestry systems where we have natural trees planted in agricultural landscapes, early stage restoration projects, or open canopy forests in the drylands. And we know that these kinds of systems are really important and that they're being actively stewarded and managed by local communities, but they remain largely underrepresented, which means that we can't quantify biodiversity richness, restoration potential, carbon sequestration rates, or other kinds of metrics for these landscapes. So the tropical tree cover data really aims to improve the accuracy with which we can detect these tree distributions with an eye towards revolutionizing how we monitor restoration efforts. Next slide. So to kick us off, I would like to start with some of the specifications of the data. So this is a 10-meter resolution data set for the year 2020. We use Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 optical and radar imagery, and we apply a convolutional neural network to perform image segmentation on monthly composite images. In doing so, we get a 97% user's accuracy and a 96% producer's accuracy. The geographic coverage is 4.35 billion hectares of land in the tropics. And it's also worth noting how we define a tree, because this has implications for how we measure tree cover. We use both a height and a crown diameter criteria. And so we include woody vegetation that's above 5 meters in height, or above 3 meters in height if it has a crown diameter greater than 5 meters. We exclude woody vegetation that's shorter than 3 meters, and we also exclude certain monoculture crops, including tea, coffee, sugar, banana, and cacti. Next slide. All of the training and validation data are labeled via photo interpretation of high resolution imagery. And we do that using a platform called Collect Earth Online. Approximately 18,000 training samples and 1,400 validation samples were used. And the sampling schema for the validation data is a stratified random sample by subregion, where we ensure that at least one sample falls within each region of the processing extent, so within the tropics, with a minimum distance of at least 5 kilometers between the training and validation data points. Next slide. We were really pleased that our methodology was published in Remote Sensing of an Environment in April this year. Some of the key findings are listed here. And in light of these findings, we discussed the potential for improving the monitoring of tree cover in drylands, as well as tree cover in agricultural and urban areas using the tropical tree cover data. The manuscript also includes extensive comparisons with existing tree cover data products to really demonstrate the value of this approach. So the visualization here compares the tropical tree cover data with other medium resolution data sets to show some of the qualitative differences at small spatial scales for different regions in the world. Next slide. Here's an example of a kind of zoomed in representation of the data overlaid on an agricultural landscape, where we're really able to pick up the majority of trees on these farms. If you haven't had the chance, I would highly recommend taking some time to just pan around different parts of the world, the way that Gabby did in her illustration earlier of the Global Forest Watch platform, because you can really see how different tree distributions are picked up, and it's quite beautiful. Next slide. From there, we can derive summary statistics. So this table on the left has summary statistics about the percentage of cropland and urban land that contains greater than 10% tree cover across a variety of different regions. You can imagine that these statistics can easily be derived for any area of interest. For example, the way that Gabby showed, you could upload a polygon of interest or draw it on the Global Forest Watch platform and derive statistics accordingly. And so this would allow for insights that support decision-making and monitoring efforts across different scales. For example, if we think about cropland, the cropland numbers presented here, the data can help stakeholders understand where to prioritize tree planting on cropland or identify where agroforestry efforts have been successful. When it comes to the urban areas, higher resolution urban tree cover maps and statistics can really help us better understand the role and contribution of trees in densely populated areas, and also plan for equity in urban green spaces. Next slide. And finally, these statistics can inform larger indicators, such as those that are used in forest resource assessments or other monitoring systems. For example, we're in the process of using the tropical tree cover data in the design of an updated trees outside of forest indicator for the Global Forest Review. This will be published in the coming month, so we look forward to sharing it with you. Next slide. I want to note that there's two versions of the tropical tree cover data available on Global Forest Watch and the Open Data Portal. We have the 10-meter resolution data set, as you can see highlighted here and showing on the map. And then we also have a half-hectare version. Gabby illustrated this well. I just wanted to note that when you arrive at the TTC data on Global Forest Watch, it's going to be displayed with a threshold of 40%. And that's something that you're able to manually adjust. The data is also available as Google Earth Engine assets, since we know we have a lot of Google Earth Engine users out there, and you can find those links available in our GitHub repository. Next slide. Recognizing that GFW is now home to a variety of different tree cover data sets, including tropical tree cover, we've produced blogs and communication materials that explain the data sets in a more accessible manner if you're someone who doesn't want to read the publications. So we also have documentation available for developers if you're interested in accessing the data through WRI's data API. Next slide. In the blog post I just referenced, there's a really helpful table that provides guidance on which Global Forest Watch tree cover data set to use for your specific application. I really like this table because it brings you right to the answer you need without requiring technical expertise or remote sensing background. For example, if you look at this table, you can quickly understand that the TTC data cannot be used to monitor tree cover outside of the tropics. It's a tropical extent data set. However, due to its spatial and temporal resolution, it might be the best fit if you want to set baselines in 2020 for smallholder restoration projects. Next slide. Finally, I just want to mention the new research and updates that we've been working really hard on recently. Next slide. This is a visual representation of our research portfolio right now. So at the top, you'll be familiar with that image. It's the TTC data for 2020. You can imagine that as kind of our umbrella data product. Our team is currently expanding coverage to produce annual data for the years 2017 to 2022. Those will also be 10-meter resolution data sets for the tropics. Additionally, we're working on deriving carbon estimates at a half-hectare resolution for restoration projects. And finally, at the bottom, looking to improve the separation of natural and planted trees using the existing TTC data set. And that is an effort that will hopefully improve detection of agroforestry systems and potentially allow us to separate out commodities like cocoa, coffee, oil, and rubber. Oil, palm, and rubber. Next slide. Finally, I'll note that the production of the annual data, or through the production of the annual data, we've improved the processing techniques across many regions. So here you can see a comparison of the data in Costa Rica in 2020, where we had a couple of coverage gaps. And now in 2022 data, there's improved spatial coverage and quality. Next slide. I'll end by saying that all of the content presented today was the work of a team. So specifically the contributions of John Brandt and Justine Spohr. So I'll express my gratitude to them for letting me present this work today. And thank you all for the opportunity to share more about the data. We're really excited that it's going to be available to new and existing GFW users. And I look forward to answering your questions in the Q&A.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. Yeah, we've already got a lot of questions coming in. Some of them we'll answer as they come in, others will answer live during the Q&A, especially if there's a lot of questions that are similar. So now that we've been introduced a little bit to the tropical tree cover data and what's coming up in the pipeline for it, let's learn a little bit about how it's being applied. So I would like to introduce our colleague out of WRI Africa, Eric Lawrence Nyanga, which not easy to pronounce, but hopefully I did okay. And he works on restoration monitoring for AFR 100, which is a country-led effort to bring 100 million hectares of land in Africa into restoration by 2030. So Eric, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and welcome everyone. As she mentioned, my name is Laurent Eric Nyanga, and I work as the AFR 100 Restoration Monitoring Associate for WRI Africa. I will probably start from the continental level with the challenge, the opportunity, the commitment, the application, and a little bit of a deep dive in the use case in Malawi. Next slide. So studies have shown that Africa is becoming the most degraded continent due to unsustainable land practices. And this has led to over 65% of its arable land being too damaged to food production, which is very critical, bearing in mind that African population is growing very rapidly. And this, of course, has led to so many other challenges, such as food insecurity, loss of biodiversity, and of course, resource conflicts across the different countries. On the other hand, Africa has the biggest opportunity in the world with over 750 million hectares of land available for restoration. Next slide, please. And so it is from this challenge and opportunity that in 2015, during the African Union Summit, that the AFR 100 was endorsed. And this was endorsed by 30 African countries, which committed to restoring 100 million hectares of degraded landscapes in Africa. Next slide, please. And from 2015 to 2023, this has grown to 34 countries with now the commitments upping to 129 million hectares. And you can see from this graphic that these are the different commitments from the different countries. And this now helps in responding to some of these continental and international obligations at the global level that Fred talked about in the first presentation. Next slide. And that was AFR 100 at phase 1. So now we are in phase 2. If you click on the next, and phase 2 was supposed to deliver on some of the missing pieces in AFR 100. If you click on the next, yes. And so the next phase is focusing on some of these missing pieces. And one of the key missing pieces is how do we monitor progress of these restoration efforts happening across all these 34 countries to track the progress of all these 129 million hectares across by 2030 by using such platforms such as Global Forest Watch and TTC data. Next slide, please. And so using TTC data, we have been able to at least report on the tree cover at the AFR 100 level. And you can see from some of these graphics, the overall tree cover within the AFR 100 countries, 34 countries, and then the tree cover across the different land use land cover classes. For instance, tree cover within the croplands, tree cover within urban areas. And you can see the different dynamics across all these countries. Next slide. So from the continental level, we then have a few applications within some of these countries. And in Malawi, in 2017, Malawi launched its National Forest and Landscape Restoration Strategy. And this strategy clearly identified who are these stakeholders within these landscapes, what needs to be done, and by whom, and what needs to be done where. And as you can see, if you click on the next, icon here, you can see that there's highlighted one of the critical sectors, which is the agricultural sector. Next slide, please. And so from 2017, several projects have been implemented in Malawi. One of them being the MCHF project. MCHF stands for Modern Cooking for Healthy Forests, which had so many objectives, at least 5 objectives. But one of the objectives was to improve the government of Malawi National Monitoring Unit, enhance their capacity to utilize some of these tools, and technologies to manage and monitor the forest landscapes, or to track tree cover for several of the government's initiatives. Next slide. And it is from that objective that this methodology or standard operating procedure was developed. From the strategy, there was this strategy to achieve at least 10% tree cover on 50% of cropland in Malawi by 2020 and 80% of cropland by 2030. So from this, if you go to the next slide, please. From this, from this methodology, or SOP, it was able to clearly outline how can we be able to go to Global Forest Watch, access the data from the portal, and use other open source tools as well to be able to analyze, create the baseline mask out some of these particular areas, and then be able to derive statistics at the national level and at the subnational level, from national to subnational to traditional authority level, and show the trends of what has been happening. So this is being refined. For now, I think Jessica has mentioned the production of the TTC data. We were able to do assessment or analysis for the year 2020, but the methodology is broad enough to enable them now to run the National Monitoring Unit to run this from 2017 to the current year, 2023. Back to you, Gabby. That was all from me.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. Next, I would like to introduce Carla Posada Quinteros and Eric Ortiz from the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in El Salvador, one of our partners also implementing tropical tree cover data. Carla and Eric will be talking today in Spanish, but you'll be able to hear the translated interpretation if you're not already in the Spanish language room. So no need to change rooms or do anything about that. So Carla and Eric, on to you to talk a bit more about your work. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días, o buenas tardes, o buenas noches. Gracias por la invitación que nos hace WRI y también el Global Forest Watch. Vamos a compartir brevemente lo que hemos trabajado con el apoyo de ustedes. Para eso vamos a hablar de los instrumentos que hemos desarrollado que apoyan o sustentan la restauración y luego el ejemplo de cómo hemos utilizado los datos del Global Forest Watch y del TTC. Todo esto se enmarca en el ministerio o en El Salvador, un país de la región centroamericana que hace unos años se unió a la declaración, o de hecho fue quien declaró o propuso la declaración de la década de la restauración y se comprometió a restaurar 1 millón de hectáreas. A partir de esto, siguiente diapositiva. A partir de esto, pues, siguiente. Bueno, quizás perdón, a partir de esto se trabajó o se está trabajando en diferentes instrumentos que apoyan esta declaración o ayudan a cumplirla. Uno de los instrumentos es la planificación del paisaje para desarrollar la restauración, que incluye diferentes ejes o líneas que nos guían sobre cómo hacer la restauración. Y dado que en El Salvador casi el 55% o más del porcentaje del territorio agrícola o está siendo usado en la agricultura, un instrumento, otro instrumento de política que apoya este tema es el programa de incentivos y desincentivos ambientales, que también fue apoyado, tuvo incidencia por la aceleradora de políticas de incentivos que desarrolló WRI en 2020. Este programa está basado en la Ley de Medio Ambiente, que es nuestra ley, la que nos dicta como los en los diferentes temas de la gestión de los recursos naturales. Y este programa siguiente se enfoca especialmente en 3 instrumentos: incentivos económicos, no económicos, la siguiente, y desincentivos. Actualmente estamos trabajando en económicos y no económicos. Los 3 que ven acá en el recuadro de la derecha son los incentivos mixtos que se dirigen exclusivamente a la restauración de ecosistemas pero prácticamente en paisajes productivos. Y son 3 de los que estamos desarrollando, que se pilotearon y ahora ya se están trabajando, se les está dando seguimiento y se ha ampliado el trabajo. Otra de los instrumentos con los que trabajamos, siguiente, es la métrica para la valoración de ecosistemas, y aquí también el WRI tuvo un papel o un rol muy importante apoyándonos con un equipo de mentoría con la que construimos esta métrica, y se basó en la información que ya teníamos como país. No fue necesaria hacer otra información, sino que utilizar la de base. Siguiente, para definir esta métrica, pues se estudiaron diferentes métricas que utilizan otros países como Colombia, Perú, Australia, Estados Unidos, para definir, en ese entonces fue orientada a la compensación ambiental, pero nos dimos cuenta que esta métrica es también o puede ser también utilizada para definir sitios que son prioritarios para la restauración. Y esta métrica se compone de tres elementos, que es área en hectáreas por calidad, que es la calidad se las variables que vemos a la izquierda en los mapas, la remanencia de los ecosistemas, las zonas de recarga o que han sido priorizadas por alta, media o baja recarga, la significancia estratégica, que es el cruce de tres instrumentos, lo que tenemos como protección por ley, las ANP, las zonas de amortiguamiento y otras, lo que se trabajó para definir sitios prioritarios de restauración en 2017, los sitios de conectividad, sobre todo de biodiversidad de fauna. Y también el tema de la condición, que es un elemento, condición de los ecosistemas y agroecosistemas, que es un elemento que se obtuvo o que, no, o que se refiere en este momento a la diversidad o qué tan diversos son esos ecosistemas, y es así como esta combinación o este factor nos da unidades de biodiversidad, que son estos de estos atributos que vemos acá. Para todos estos instrumentos hemos tenido el apoyo, como ya lo mencioné, de WRI, y la restauración es muy importante que se sustente en instrumentos de política para que pueda para que pueda consolidarse y que pueda desarrollarse, y también desarrollarse a diferentes escalas y con todas las instituciones que tienen relación, que es lo que ahora estamos explorando. Eric, siguiente.
Hola a todos, mucho gusto. Gracias. Pues como decía Carla, ¿verdad? Nosotros hemos tenido la oportunidad de contar con el apoyo de WRI, de utilizar estos datos de escala global y pues tener este ejercicio de poder bajarle ese análisis a una escala de país. Lo que pueden ver ustedes en pantalla es las distintas aplicaciones que hemos logrado cruzando una serie de variables. Entre ellos, podemos ver esa aptitud para el pago por servicios ambientales, el cual nos permite validar qué tan adecuado es ese territorio para poder aplicar ese programa de incentivos y desincentivos. También el índice de significancia ambiental, que es uno de los insumos que se está incorporando dentro del proceso de evaluación ambiental y que nos está ayudando a poder categorizar de mejor forma los proyectos. La clasificación por ecosistemas, que esto es ese análisis de cobertura, ¿verdad? Que todos como usuarios o como planificadores queremos entender de qué forma está transformándose en nuestro territorio. Y la conectividad y el MSPA, que los colegas de Costa Rica creo que lo van a identificar de forma más rápida, que es esos corredores biológicos y las áreas núcleo en donde nosotros estamos priorizando la conservación de la vida silvestre. Todo esto, pues obviamente requiere de un análisis mucho más intenso, detallado, y pues aquí es a donde surge la Global Forest Watch, en donde nosotros podemos estar monitoreando periódicamente los cambios que se dan. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Y pues esto nos ayuda a mejorar nuestros procesos de análisis. En este diagrama lo que queremos representarles es de qué forma nosotros estamos partiendo de una jerarquía de mitigación ante cualquier intervención en los territorios. Lo que buscamos es que todos tengamos ese ejercicio de analizar las distintas alternativas darse. los distintos cambios que puede hacerse en un proyecto, en una intervención en los ecosistemas, en las coberturas, y que sea cual sea el proceso siguiente, sea por una categorización para un proceso de evaluación ambiental, sea porque estoy planificando ruralmente o urbanísticamente, o sea porque estoy aplicando un programa como el de incentivos de incentivos, yo puedo utilizar la información que como ministerio estamos publicando. Tenga la oportunidad de utilizar los insumos gratuitos, que esto es algo que les agradecemos a todos ustedes, que son gratuitos. Entonces, que pueda utilizar esos insumos geoespaciales para poder hacer los distintos análisis y que a la vez pueda hacer investigaciones, porque eso es nuestro siguiente paso, realizar investigaciones para poder retroalimentar nuestra base de datos local. Eso nos va a ayudar también a definir las acciones de restauración, de qué forma vamos a nosotros a intervenir de forma más asertiva, proactiva y eficiente el territorio. Y a la vez, un tema de monitoreo, reporte y verificación. Aquí es a donde nuevamente utilizamos o tomamos de la mano de todos estos instrumentos, ¿verdad? La restauración de los ecosistemas y los ecosistemas es un análisis dinámico, como decía Fred, a distintas escalas. Partimos de una escala nacional, bajamos a una regional y estamos en una local. Y pues ahí es donde el TTC nos ayuda a poder hacerlo de una forma mucho más ágil. Sin embargo, siempre tenemos que contar con el sistema de monitoreo local y aquí es a donde Forest Watcher nos ayuda. Entonces ya tenemos como que esa combinación de instrumentos y de capacidades técnicas que nos ayudan a hacer de mejor forma el trabajo y tal vez hasta replantear inclusive las estrategias. Siguiente diapositiva, por favor. ¿Y cómo hemos aplicado pues, los insumos que nos han proporcionado WRI y Global Forest Watch? Pues en la siguiente diapositiva, pues, la primera aplicación que hemos dado. Next slide, please. La primera que hicimos fue nosotros dividir el territorio en regiones. ¿Por qué queríamos dividirlo en regiones? Pues porque en la métrica de compensación, en la métrica de restauración, de valoración de ecosistemas y paisajes, lo que queremos es evitar esa dispersión de acciones. Entonces queríamos ver de qué forma podíamos segregar las áreas núcleos, segregar las dinámicas territoriales para que las acciones fuesen lo más concentradas y eficientes en sus impactos. Ya no perseguir solamente crecimiento, sino también lograr condición, mejorar esa condición que presentaba Carla. Lograr también ese monitoreo de cómo está esa ganancia de cobertura. Y pues en la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Ver de qué forma las dinámicas urbanas a distintas escalas, presiones. Lo que ustedes pueden ver ahí es como el área metropolitana de San Salvador, que es nuestra capital, va subiéndose encima del volcán. Nosotros somos denominados, y hace poco se publicó algo en la NASA acerca de esta ciudad, de que estamos en medio de volcanes. Entonces nosotros tenemos que ver de qué forma vamos estableciendo estrategias para que la expansión urbana no se vaya montando en el volcán y no terminar en el cráter. Aquí es donde el Global Forest Watch y el TTC nos está ayudando a poder establecer esas dinámicas, esos cambios de cobertura, ese cambio de porcentaje de cobertura que es muy importante y a la vez nos ayuda también a ver cómo está cambiando dentro de las zonas urbanas. En la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. También estamos haciendo análisis en cuanto al programa de incentivos y desincentivos que lo estamos aplicando en la parte de los sistemas agroforestales, ver cómo de esas de mejorar las prácticas, las buenas prácticas agrícolas, nos ayudan a ver si hay cambios en las coberturas, en los porcentajes de cobertura, los sistemas agroforestales se están incrementando, de qué forma eso está también controlando o mitigando la expansión urbana dentro de esos sistemas. Y en la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Y también en los sistemas silvopastoriles o en los agroecosistemas que nosotros hemos denominado así, ver de qué forma los bordes de las o de las parcelas logran conservar esos perímetros de árboles, las áreas de uso restringido que nosotros denominamos así aquí en los márgenes de las quebradas y de los ríos, ver de qué forma esos se logran conservar porque son formas de mitigar los peligros y de adaptarse también al cambio climático, pues porque logramos prevenir desastres. Entonces todo eso lo estamos logrando con estos instrumentos, estos insumos que están proporcionándose. Y pues en la siguiente diapositiva. También creo que es importante reconocer el compartir experiencias. Estas experiencias que muchas veces uno se da cuenta en los lugares de encuentro, de convenios, en las experiencias así como estos talleres de aceleradores de políticas que tuvimos con WRI en Guatemala y en Costa Rica, en donde uno experimenta cómo está manejando los datos Costa Rica, cómo los está manejando Paraguay, Chile, cómo cada uno lo está adaptando de cierta forma y uno se le da ideas. Es importante también estar suscrito. Yo recomiendo siempre eso, suscribirse siempre a los boletines informativos de Global Forest Watch, de WRI, porque mandan información y cuando menos uno piensa, ahí surgen las respuestas. La respuesta de TTC así surgió por un boletín que llegó y lo leímos y pues fue una luz para nuestro bloqueo mental que teníamos en ese momento. Y pues los análisis multidisciplinarios, aquí es a donde el compartir esas visiones nos ayudan a ver otros enfoques. Y pues creo que todo es un proceso de mejora continua, ¿verdad? El TTC ha ido evolucionando y no dudo que seguirá evolucionando. También nuestra métrica y también las aplicaciones que le vamos a seguir dando. Creo que eso es todo de mi parte. Sí, gracias.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric and Carla, for describing your use case. Next, I'm going to move on to Katie Raytar, who is our last speaker in this series. And she's a senior research associate with Land and Carbon Lab and will be introducing data on tree cover gain and also net change, which was developed by our partners at the University of Maryland. So Katie, on to you.
Hi, thanks, Gabby. You hear me okay? Great. Yeah, so as Gabby said, I'll be giving an overview of 2 new data sets on Global Forest Watch. Next slide, please. Both of which, as Gabby said, are derived from forest height dynamics data for the period 2000 to 2020 and produced by our partners at the University of Maryland's Global Land Analysis and Discovery Lab. And so the data represent the height of woody vegetation for a base year of 2000 and an end year of 2020 using JEDI LiDAR forest structure measurements and Landsat 30-meter resolution imagery. And the data tree cover extent is defined as tree height greater than or equal to 5 meters for a 30-meter pixel. And by comparing tree cover extent in 2000 and 2020, you can derive results on tree cover that was gained, lost, and remained stable over that time period. And so from this tree height data, 2 products are now on Global Forest Watch: tree cover gain from 2000 to 2020, and net change in tree cover for the same period. And next slide, please. I'll start by diving into the gain data layer in a bit more detail. So it represents 30 by 30 meter pixels of cumulative gain. And gain is defined as pixels where tree height was less than 5 meters in 2000, then grew to 5 meters or greater in 2020. And the primary use case for this data are areas of no tree cover in 2000 that became dense tree cover and a height of above or equal to 5 meters by 2020. Next slide, please. And so here's an example of what the data look like on Global Forest Watch. I'm zoomed into southern Brazil here in this screenshot just to make it easier to see the coverage of the data. But it is available globally, as you saw at the very beginning when Gabby was doing her demo on Global Forest Watch. Next slide, please. And if you're on the platform and you navigate to the dashboard section of the site and you click on forest change, that will take you to summary statistics for tree cover gain. And here's a look at the global results, which show you that in total, there was 131 million hectares of tree cover that was gained globally between 2000 and 2020. We also have data showing how much of the gain was estimated to be inside or outside plantations. And that's based on an overlay with WRI's spatial database of planted trees, which has nearly global coverage, and a new update of that database will be coming out shortly. And you can view these statistics. I'm showing them on global level here, but you can view them at national and subnational level for any country down to district or county level. Next slide, please. And so one application of this gain data is in a new section of the Global Forest Review, which is also accessible through Global Forest Watch. It's called the Targets Tracker, and it seeks to put forth a best estimate on progress toward global deforestation and restoration goals. For example, there's a global target set forth under the Bond Challenge, the New York Declaration on Forests, and related initiatives toward restoring 350 million hectares of lost and degraded forests by 2030. And using the gain data as a proxy, we've estimated that based on the historical rate of gain over the past 20 years, which is about 6 million hectares per year, the world is off track to meet that target. It needs to ramp up to at least 22 million hectares of tree cover gain per year to meet that 2030 target. And you can look at this in more detail. There's a link at the bottom there. Just go to Global Forest Review and click on Targets Tracker. Next slide, please. And so the second data set I'll talk about is net change in tree cover from 2000 to 2020. So using that same base data for tree cover height, this derivative data set compares the difference in height between 2000 and 2020 to provide summary statistics on both gain and loss for global, national, and subnational areas. So in other words, this is the same data on tree cover gain that I just described, but then it combines that with the loss data over the same period to show the total fluctuation in tree cover. And it tells you by administrative area which ones had net gain, net loss, and neutral change in tree cover. Next slide, please. So here's a look at the data on Global Forest Watch. This is a screenshot of the national level, where countries in shades of blue are the net gain countries, and then the shades of pink and purple are degrees of net loss, and the white color is neutral change. Next slide, please. So drilling down to subnational, this is administrative 1 level, which is state or provincial level. You can see much more nuance in the shades of pink or blue. For example, some countries that have overall net loss do have, subnational pockets of gain. And so it does show you that the national picture isn't telling you the whole story. There's always some nuance to these gains and losses. Next slide, please. And so drilling down even further to admin 2 level, which is a district, county, or municipality level, you can see even more detail for isolating where there are significant losses or gains. And that will help to isolate kind of where there are problem areas or success areas for gain, which like I said, you can't really see on a national or global level. Next slide, please. And so if we go back to the Global Forest Watch dashboard, these net change data can be viewed as summary statistics and pie charts. On the left is the global view, showing the total stable forest area, the total gain and loss, and then disturbance as well. Disturbance are areas where there was fluctuation in both gain and loss over the time period. That kind of gives you that global snapshot of total forest dynamics. On the right-hand side is an example of the data for a country level, showing Guatemala here. So you get, a national picture of forest change in that country. And like I said before, you can also drill down to an administrative 1 or 2 level to see even more detail. Next slide, please. And so I'll wrap up with a few caveats to keep in mind for the data. Firstly, tree cover gain is the best proxy we have for restoration, but they're not equivalent under most definitions. For example, some restoration does not involve trees at all. Of course, there are lots of different types of restoration. And even if it doesn't, even with tree cover gain, it could be regrowth after a natural disturbance like a cyclone or a fire. Or to the second bullet point here, some gain that is detected on this method is monoculture and industrial tree plantations, which are not typically restoration and could be ecologically harmful. So there is a lot of nuance to what you're seeing in this data that is important to tease out. A few other caveats is that these data do not pick up sparser tree cover. It errs on the side of denser canopy cover, threshold of about 20% on average for 30-meter pixel. And as you would expect when detecting tree cover gain, there is a lag time between the planting or regeneration of trees and then the detection, especially for slower growing species and natural forest regrowth, which means gain is likely could be 5 to 10 years before it starts being detected by satellite. Next slide, please. And so, as Fred mentioned earlier, to set the tone, measuring restoration progress is hard. There's a lot to keep in mind. It's not quite as straightforward as other types of monitoring, but the technology keeps advancing, and we keep moving forward toward the ultimate goal of measuring restoration progress. And just to give you a brief overview of what's coming down the pike for Global Forest Watch related to the data sets I just mentioned. In the shorter term, we expect to have 5-year intervals for gain. So it's the same data set, but some interim data points in between to provide more of a trajectory over time with the gain data. And in the longer term, the University of Maryland is developing global annual loss and gain with 2 variables, both canopy cover and tree height. And with that, that's what I'll end on. Over to you, Gabby.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. Yeah. So I hope that that was useful to hear a bit more of the background. We've had quite a lot of questions come in throughout all of the presentations. So thank you so much for asking your questions, and please continue to ask them. Now's the time for question and answer. I think we have, there we are. Yeah. So everyone is really available who's given presentations today on this data to answer questions. So pop it into the Q&A button at the very bottom of the Zoom. If you haven't already, we've already been monitoring it. So we'll just, I guess, dive right in. One of our, I guess, most frequently asked question, we had this a lot, is on how to differentiate between natural forests and planted, including things like rubber and cocoa and things that are more plantations. So I will pass this on to Jessica to talk more about this.
Thank you. Yeah, I recognize that everybody is very interested right now in the separation of natural and planted trees. So I thought it'd be helpful first, I'll underscore what's included and what's excluded in terms of agricultural trees in the current TTC product. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're working on or what we're working towards in the new research that I mentioned around plantation cover. So right now in the TTC data for 2020 that you can access on Global Forest Watch, we exclude certain monoculture plantations. So that includes tea, coffee, sugar, bananas, and cacti. And there's a few reasons for this. In some cases, such as banana, the crop doesn't actually meet our tree definition. So fun fact of the day, bananas are not trees, they're actually herbs. In other scenarios, we're able to capture and model the spectral signature or the phenological characteristics of certain tree crops that allow us to exclude that vegetation. But one of the areas that we're working on, one of the new research areas that I mentioned, is improving that separation of the additional tree crops that are included in the TTC layer right now. So right now, if you look at the TTC on a map, you'll see that it includes rubber, oil palm, orchards, and other agricultural trees within the tree cover layer. So right now we are leading research that will use a transfer learning approach and for image classification with the idea of being able to separate out some of the planted and agricultural tree crops that are currently in the TTC layer. So we're currently doing prototyping around that in a couple of key geographies and hoping to release some more information and updates about that in 2024.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that answers everyone's questions around that. If not, we can always discuss that a little bit more. Next, there were a couple of different questions about standard data collection tools or available tools to monitor and evaluate restoration projects. So I'll pass that on to Katie Raytar to speak more about some of the tools that can be used for monitoring.
Sure. Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, I think given the all the nuances and somewhat of the complexity of monitoring restoration, there often isn't a single tool that you might be using to measure restoration progress. It often might be a combination of different tools. And so we actually have a website that we recently developed. It came out last year. It's called restorationmonitoringtools.org. I can put the link in the chat as well. But it basically breaks down the different steps for monitoring, like just choosing your indicators, what tools are good for that, what tools can you use for data collection, whether you're in the field, and there's certain apps you can use, or depending on the type of restoration, like if it's agroforestry, you might want to use collect earth or a sample-based tool. We also have the tropical tree cover data featured in there as well. And so there's a lot of different options you have for monitoring restoration. And so the remote sensing based data that we presented today is one option, depending on kind of the type of restoration that you're looking to monitor, and whether it's tree based, of course, that would be the scenario that you would use the data we presented here for, of course. But yeah, like I mentioned, I can put the link in the chat. And so just generally, it's usually with monitoring restoration, it's going to be multiple tools that you will need to combine into your system. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Katie. There's a lot of interest in hearing more about the tropical tree cover data and what's new in the pipeline. So many questions about when we'll have annual change data and when we'll have carbon estimates related to that. So Jessica, can you talk a bit more about that timeline?
Absolutely. So we are currently working on developing the data for multiple years. And working towards the publication of the methods. So the data will be available from 2017 to 2022. Right now, it's hard to say exactly when that data will be released, but we look forward to sharing some more updates on that in 2024. And then with respect to the carbon estimates, it's likely those will be tied to WRI's TerraMatch platform. And so we will also share more information on that next year.
Great, thanks. So stay tuned for next year with that. I know that people are really excited to see that come through. So there'll be communications as we get closer. Next, we have a question for Carla and Eric. The question is the Ministry of Environment of El Salvador considering biodiversity initiatives such as KBAs in its biodiversity unit metrics?
Hola. Por el momento no. Por el momento, como expliqué, dentro del atributo de condición estamos incluyendo únicamente la diversidad de especies medida por Shannon, el índice de Shannon, que se refiere únicamente a la parte de cobertura arbórea específicamente. Pero nuestra meta es trabajar el 2024 para robustecer esta métrica, específicamente la variable que no incorpore solamente parte de cobertura forestal, sino otros aspectos de biodiversidad. Entonces sí lo vamos a hacer.
Great, thanks so much. Next, there's a lot of questions about how we define trees. I don't know if Jessica or Katie, it might be different depending on the data. So maybe Jessica, if you want to jump in first, and I'm not sure if Katie also you'd like to jump in after.
Sure, I can share how we define a tree for the tropical tree cover data. So as I mentioned in my presentation, We use two types of criteria. We look at the tree height, and then we also look at the canopy diameter. So with respect to tree height, the vegetation must be between 3 to 5 meters in height to be considered a tree. And if it's above 3 meters, then it must have a 5-meter canopy diameter. So you might be thinking, how do you verify that? We do so through photo interpretation of high-resolution imagery. So we've used a variety of different types of imagery to do that, and then also consulted regional forestry experts to ensure that we can use that criteria in labeling the training data. And then I think, as I mentioned, we exclude woody vegetation that's less than 3 meters in height, and then we're also able to exclude certain monoculture plantations.
Yeah, and for the gain and the net change data, there's the methods are different for this data set, and so the variable that has been mapped is tree height, based on modeled LiDAR measurements, and then also it's based on Landsat collection 1 imagery. And so the definition we're using for the data, like whether it's gain or not, is 5 meters. So if it's less than 5 meters, it's essentially, it's like a 0-1 data set. So if it's less than 5 meters, it's 0, no tree cover, and then above 5 meters or above, it's considered tree cover, and then it is part of the tree cover extent layer. But the data itself, the variable is height. So you have measurements from roughly 3 meters at the lowest point up to tallest tree, average tree cover per pixel, about 40 or so meters. And so you could make definitions differently using that height information, but that's we used a 5-meter threshold for these data to match the FAO definition on Global Forest Watch. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We have had some questions about looking at different mixed species, native restoration. I think we talked about plantations. Do we have any other kind of information we can include, Jessica, about the different types of species that may constitute what someone's looking to monitor?
So with respect to species, the tropical tree cover data doesn't distinguish trees by species at the moment. And that's just because species can reflect unique spectral bands. So that can help us identify certain species, but there can also be a lot of variation in how those spectral bands are reflected within a species due to tree age, health, phenology, and other aspects. So that makes the identification really hard. So the TTC data right now doesn't differentiate between tree species, just to clarify.
Great, thanks for the clarification. Yeah, a few different questions on tree species. We've also had a few different questions on EUDR compliance. Maybe Fred can speak a bit to what data can say about this compliance.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Yeah, I saw a few about the EUDR. So the European Union has made a law that you cannot import commodities, 7 commodities who cause deforestation. And the cutoff date for that is the 31st of December 2020. So all countries have to look at where's deforestation happening in my country and what did it cause. Now, the EU doesn't have an official data set, and they will not bring out an official data set, but every company has to come up with their own data. So can this data be used? Yes, it can be used, from January 2020 on, when you see deforestation, and you can identify what the deforestation is. And if it is corn or whatever, well, then it is difficult to import it into the EU. So yes, it can definitely be used. It's definitely an quality to say yes, this is happening here, this is happening here. I think the GFW data sets can be used as part of an evidence. having said that, again, there is not an official data set of GFW for the EU. There are different data sets, and it's all about giving that amount of evidence to the EU to show that some actors do not have deforestation.
Great. Thanks so much, Fred. Okay, moving on. We have a question asking, do you think using GFW could be useful to monitor the efforts of restoration yearly? Or is it better suited for retrospective analyses that can help, for instance, choose sites for restoration activities? Jessica, do you have an answer for that one?
Sure. So if you're using the TTC data on the GFW platform, you can certainly think about how the data can inform an understanding of restoration potential for certain areas. It can also be used to set baselines for restoration projects. So it's worth noting that using the data requires or measuring and validating the results of your planting project using the TTC data would require that the planting project started about 3 to 5 years before 2020 in order for us to be able to detect that tree. So the planting project would have had to take place in between 2015 to 2017 approximately in order for the TTC data to be able to detect that tree in the satellite imagery. So you could very well set a baseline for restoration projects using the 2020 data. And then hopefully once we're able to release the annual data next year, you would be able to measure the progress of that restoration project over time. So that's one way of using the GFW platform with the TTC data.
Great, thank you so much. Eric, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah.
Do you want to add something to that?
Hola, sí, gracias, Jessica. De hecho, nosotros también estamos utilizando ahorita la herramienta de TTC para el monitoreo. Sin embargo, como bien explicaba Jessica, es de tener una visión a mediano o largo plazo, porque de lo contrario no se va a poder ver en el primer año el cambio que se dé en la cobertura. Por otro lado, el análisis local. Nosotros ahorita como ministerio hemos creado una metodología de levantamiento de línea base para poder registrar a dónde se siembran, establecer un polígono que se va a estar monitoreando, eso, alimentarlo y cruzarlo con la de TTC. Y pues posteriormente estarlo viendo cada año, cada 3 años, hasta que se logre un incremento en el porcentaje de la cobertura. Exactamente lo que dice Jessica, ¿verdad? Solo que nosotros ya lo estamos planteando y adoptando como parte de los procesos internos del Ministerio de Medio Ambiente para la restauración.
Great. Okay, and we have time for one last question. So I'm going to, this one is for Carla and Eric. How are the remnants of the ecosystems being defined? And what are the values to determine what it is in each of them?
Hola, sí, lo que se hizo para determinar la remanencia es revisar la información histórica que teníamos como ministerio, desde la cartografía que se generó allá por el año 2001, la que se generó posteriormente en el 2006, 2011, 2016 y 2018, y ver de qué forma lo que se registró en la cobertura fue cambiando hasta tener una cobertura final para el año 2020. Esa cobertura final para establecer la remanencia se divide cada tipo de ecosistema entre el total de ecosistemas y dependiendo del porcentaje que eso represente a nivel de total de áreas de país, eso nos dice qué tanto nos queda de ese ecosistema. Por ejemplo, en el caso de nuestros manglares es un ecosistema de muy baja remanencia, por lo tanto nosotros estamos estableciendo mucho más estrategias de protección y conservación en sus perímetros, dentro de ellos. Igual los ecosistemas de coníferas o bosques de coníferas, los pinares, nosotros estamos estableciendo estrategias o priorizando acciones de restauración para esas zonas. Los bosques de galería o los inundables son otros tipos de ecosistemas de baja remanencia. Y pues, contrariamente, los agroecosistemas son aquellos de muy alta remanencia, esos que tenemos en abundancia, como decía Carla. Así es como se establece la remanencia.
Pero quizás también para complementar, otro de los instrumentos que se utilizó fue el Inventario Nacional de Bosques. El Inventario Nacional de Bosques hizo un barrido en el país o un análisis de país donde estaban cientos parcelas. En esas parcelas identificó diferentes tipos de bosque y incluyó el cultivo de café. Dentro de esos cultivos, pues tipos de bosque, se determinaron cuántas hectáreas y la condición de esos tipos de bosque. Entonces, esa información también se cruzó con la que Eric menciona que tomamos desde 2001 y 2011, que son los tipos de ecosistemas. Eso se para obtener la remanencia. Y lo que se hizo en la métrica fue asignarle un valor. Entre menos tengamos de un ecosistema, es mayor su remanencia, más, más protegida es ese ecosistema por ser de baja remanencia.
Okay, thank you. This is the final question, and this one's for Eric Lawrence. Could you talk a little bit about what's next for the methodology for doing these measurements in the context of AFR 100?
Certainly. Most of the restoration projects within AFR 100 are happening across agroforestry systems. And so this methodology will be very ideal to monitor all these wonderful restoration projects happening within agroforestry systems. And so we are looking forward now to apply the same methodology across different countries, especially countries like Rwanda, where most of, I think 90% of all restoration projects are agroforestry based. So that is the next step, and we are hoping to roll this out across now the entire AFR 100 region.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you everyone so much for attending, and thank you speakers and panelists. We hope this was informative to you. There's a lot of questions. We didn't have time for all of them. So if we couldn't answer your question, please get in touch with us. We're happy to follow up with you. We'll drop the Global Forest Watch email in the chat. You can also find us. There's a contact on our website under help. We're also very interested in learning more about you and how you're interacting with this data or how you intend to use this data. Your feedback helps us prioritize further research and data development. So there will be a post-webinar survey. You should be seeing it shortly. Please fill it out. And if you have any other questions, any feedback, then please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you so much. We hope to hear from you soon. Bye, everyone.